You are listening to the On Purpose Podcast. What's up, everybody? Welcome to this week's edition of the On Purpose Podcast, where it's always our privilege to show up with you each and every week to get you smiling, get you moving, get you thinking a little bit. And this week, I'm excited to have with us Katherine Boyle, the host of the Beyond the Uniform with the LT's Daughter. LT short for Lieutenant in military and law enforcement ranks. And Katherine offers us a unique and heartfelt look into the lives of police officers and more specifically their family and their children by sharing personal stories and the experiences that often go untold from the viewpoint of someone raised in this lifestyle. And when I came across her Instagram and saw what she was up to, I was curious, like, what would she say being raised by a career police officer, and how could I learn from that, and what would I learn from that as far as how we raised our children, and share with people still serving or those still parenting what our professions can do in impacting our family. So before we get to sit down with Katherine and share the story, I want to make sure that I get you guys over to our social media pages, our podcast apps, YouTube, and please help us grow this channel, help us continue to serve more people around the world by liking, subscribing, and sharing the content wherever you find it. And let us know what you think. Give us some feedback. Either DM us on the socials, respond to the emails. Let us know how we can continue to serve you. And as always, it's our pleasure to be here with you. And this week, I'm excited to sit down and bring you the story of Katherine Boyle. Enjoy this week's interview. This episode is brought to you by Brenda Rice, a dedicated local realtor in Northern Colorado. Having known Brenda for over 20 years, I can vouch for her hard work and dedication while watching her transition from a police career into real estate. Brenda has teamed up with Shelley Borman from Loan Depot to create a tailored first responder program, making home buying in Northern Colorado easier and more affordable than ever. Special incentives are available to our listeners. For more details, reach out to Brenda at Brenda Rice Co. Realtor on Instagram or click the link in our show notes. Katherine, my newest friend, welcome to the On Purpose Podcast. How are you today?
I'm so good. I'm so excited to be here. Thank you.
Thank you for what you're doing in the world, and thank you for using your voice and having the courage to step out. I came across some of your content on social media, and it really got me thinking because a police officer for 21 years and raising 3 kids in that lifestyle, I don't know what their experience was, right? I don't know what the toll of the profession took on them. So when I was watching your stuff, I was like, okay, I want to sit down and talk with you to see what I can learn from your perspective and see what does that really mean for my kids and what conversations should I be having with them and open up, because they're all adults now, so they can reflect back. So I want to just thank you for speaking on that, right, and sharing that with the world, because it's a topic that I think people know impacts others, but we don't really know it in depth.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. That really means a lot to me. And I love that you are going to have those conversations and open that dialogue with them. That's really cool.
What? Yeah, why wouldn't we, right? Like,
Yeah.
it's crazy when you think about it. It's not just law enforcement. I was thinking about this as I prepared to have you on the show. Our kids are raised with our profession, right? Whatever your parents do impacts how the children are raised at home. What they
Yep.
bring home, what they share, what they don't share. And for law enforcement, first responders, the military, one of the biggest detriments I think we have sometimes, and I'll be curious on your thoughts on this, is to protect ourselves on the job, not just physically, but emotionally, because we see so much bad stuff. We build up these walls and these barriers. And we have a hard time remembering who's supposed to be on the other side of the walls at times.
Yeah, absolutely. And to your point, yeah, when it comes to parenting, like there is no handbook. So everybody is just kind of figuring it out. So I think that a lot of what I talk about can translate to almost just about any career when it comes to working parents. But I think there's just a whole nother layer when it comes to law enforcement because of all of the other challenges and hurdles and experiences that kind of fall into play, the things that they see, the politics that they deal with, even down to like the accessories that police
Mm.
officers need to use every single day. that's not normal for a kid to observe. And, yes, it could be you're building up walls, you're detaching, you're um, disconnecting, disassociating, you're drinking. It could be all of those things, but it could be just as simple as, Johnny went to school and the student next to him was talking about why cops were bad.
Mm,
Or Johnny somewhere picked up that cops can be killed on the job. And they're just observing and absorbing so much, whether it's in the house or not. I think it's really important to have those conversations and as the adult start those conversations about what their experience is.
that's so, yeah, that's a deep point, right? Because I think sometimes we don't, talking from the other side as a parent, sometimes maybe I didn't have those conversations because I didn't want my kids to think about that stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. You want to protect them.
But to your point, they're probably already thinking about it.
hmm And I would say this is even more important in modern day and age with cell phones and social media, and they have so much exposure that you don't necessarily have control over, unfortunately. So beating beating
Yeah.
society to the punch and having those conversations now, I think, is even more important than maybe when you were raising kids and when I was growing up, because they're exposed to so much
Yeah.
now.
All right, that's awesome, and I can't wait to see where this goes. But hey, I know you're into
Yeah.
fitness. I see your social media. I see you on the
Yeah.
treadmills and stuff. So we gotta warm up. We can't just get right to the heavy
Yes.
workout. All right, Catherine, you ready for this warm up?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Sunrise or sunset?
Depends on where I am, but sunset, just because I prefer to sleep in.
Fair enough. That's a good, honest answer. Favorite quote or a quote that's kind of stuck with you throughout life?
He who angers you conquers you.
Ooh, where'd you come across that one at?
My dad.
Really?
Yeah, he taught it to us. He taught it to the people who worked for him, and he still talks about it to this day.
Do you remember how old you were when you first heard it and what you thought about it?
No, I don't.
Just forever.
Yeah, just goes back to just kind of like the way we were raised. We were raised like heavy on the values, less so much on the rules and like ways to live, I guess. And that was just like one of the ones that was there.
Mm. Song stuck in your head or on repeat right now? What are you listening to?
Oh man, actually I was just singing it over and over again this morning. It Fancy Like by Walker Hayes.
Fancy like, huh? A little country for
Yeah.
you.
Yeah. Oh, I love country music. But that song, if you listen to it, that'll get stuck in your head for days.
Well, we'll see. We'll see if I do that or not. I don't know if I do this. I do have to travel tomorrow, so maybe I will put it in my head. There we go. All right, favorite
Yeah.
book.
Ooh, okay. Either The Alchemist or The Paris Wife.
Ooh, all right. I'm familiar with The Alchemist. Read that a few times. What's the Paris Wife about?
The Paris Wife is a historical fiction novel about Ernest Hemingway and his first wife, Hadley.
Really? What'd you get from that book? Why was that a favorite?
I am obsessed with them. Like, I just have such a strange. I read his book, The Garden of Eden,
Mhm.
like years and years ago, and I was just like so drawn into the story. So I did research and I found out that it was loosely based on the two of them. So then I wanted to do research on them and I learned more about them. And yeah, I was just drawn to like their love story and their heartbreaking end. And yeah, I don't know.
Very good. Very good. That's a good answer.
Yeah.
All right. Dinner with one person. Who would you have dinner with? They could have passed or still be with us. And what would you want to ask them or learn from them?
Probably Ernest Hemingway, to
Yeah,
be honest.
that ties
Yeah,
right in.
I don't know what I would ask him. I would just want to listen to him tell me stories from all of the wild stuff he experienced and did.
Yeah, what do you think he'd tell you?
Ah, well, I think he would probably start with the elephants, the elephant hunting, and then I would tell him that I don't want to hear about that.
You'd have to redirect him.
Yeah, exactly. I'd be like, no, let's talk about Hadley in Paris.
Yeah, you're probably right. That's where you'd probably start. Very cool. How you feeling? You warmed up, Catherine?
I'm warmed up.
All right, let's start the conversation. Talk to me about your younger life. So, like growing up in a law enforcement family, and what were some of the values you learned and takeaways you had from that?
So growing up, I never gave it a second thought. Like what my dad did, again, it was a different time. I think I grew up in the 90s, so police were viewed differently back then, I think. My dad was, all of the kids in the neighborhood knew that you could come to my house if something was wrong or you needed help or what have you. And I never thought about it. And I went about life. We didn't necessarily have the conversations that we kind of talked about in the beginning. My parents just normalized a lot of what we were going to experience or what we did experience. They just kind of lived their lives and it made things normal for us. And, we didn't talk about obviously what my dad did in depth. It was just pretty standard, like he puts bad guys away.
Mhm.
Um, but when it comes to values, I would say that was a priority for my parents raising kids. Like I mentioned, we weren't really raised with rules. We didn't have a ton of rules. We had fairly lenient parents, probably more lenient than all of our friends, to be honest.
Sure.
And it's because they raised us with values. So they felt like they were able to kind of give us a little extra rope, and then we had the tools and the values to make decisions in the moment. And I think that that really served us because we had just enough freedom. We knew that our parents were there for us, that they trusted us because they gave us that slack. And, we were able to make decisions for ourselves from a young age. And I think, like I said, I think that that was a big deal for us because when you put too many rules in place, I think it can be almost detrimental to everybody, right?
Mm.
Like that's gonna cause that friction and that's when kids are gonna, act out or hide things from their parents and things like that. So I think that that was something very unique that my parents did that really, worked out in their favor.
What were some of the values you remember? Did they like verbalize like these are our core values?
No, it wasn't so much, although I think that that's something that would serve people. It wasn't so much like these are our five core values as a family and you
Sure.
should live by them. It was more so, I mean, I would say like family as a value was always really big in our house. Family comes first. Um, but in general, it was a lot of like right from wrong, long-term impact of your actions or your inactions. Um, you know, we were raised Catholic, so I guess some of the Catholic values were certainly kind of in there from them and then also from our schooling. So it wasn't just like a number of established values. It was just like this is what's good, this is compassionate, this is how you might want to handle a situation. It was a lot of like guidance, I guess.
Talk to me real quick. You said something that I think is so important, and that was talking you through I can't remember if you said impact or not, but of the decisions or the non-decision. Because I think
Mhm.
sometimes as just humans, we focus on so much on what we decide and what its impact is, but if we don't make a decision, that's also a decision.
Yeah, yeah, certainly. Um, yeah, I mean, if you make an indecision, then you're making the decision that you're gonna just let the chips fall where they may. And that's something that I actually talk about now. I don't know if that's from them specifically or just from a culmination of my life,
Yeah.
but it's really important to be a proactive, and I say this term a lot, be a proactive participant in your life because if you do just kind of mosey about life and let the chips fall where they may, then that's when we get in trouble. That's when we get to be 70, 80 years old if we're lucky and we look back on our life and wonder where it went and what happened. I think
Mm.
it's easy for us to almost think of life as a practice round, if you will. I mean, I know that I did it for a period of time where it was like, oh, this is just like the play round. I'll get to when I'm going to make an impact or when I'm going to do the things that I've always dreamt about doing. But it doesn't really work like that. This is your one and only chance. So you got to do it, and you got to live with intention.
Yeah. No, that's funny. Yeah, no, you're right. I'll have to share with you later the Buried Life poem by Matthew Arnold. Since you're into Hemingway, you might like some old school poetry.
Yeah, I'd love it.
From I think 1852, 1857, somewhere I have it on the computer, but it's basically called The Buried Life, and it's just that. Like at the end of his life, he's reflecting where did his life come and where did it go? Because it wasn't the life he was meant to live. Like there was so much more in our tank.
Yeah. Yeah. And we don't want to think about those things. Like we don't necessarily want to think about the end of our life. But the fact of the matter is it's going to come, and we can either let it come or we can live our life and then, be as joyous as possible when we're towards the end of it.
Yeah, and be free, right? Be free at the
Yeah.
end, knowing like, hey, I don't have to hold on. I don't have to
Mhm.
begrudgingly go to what's next because I've lived this life and I lived a life that gave and received and was
Exactly.
full.
Yeah. And I'm confident in the legacy that I'm leaving behind, whether
Yeah.
it's children or a business, you know.
Or even the fact that you just showed up for other people,
Yeah. That's a good point.
right? Because there's that saying out there that you die two deaths. You die when you die, and
Mhm.
then you die again the last time somebody mentions your name.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, that's such a good point because yeah, your legacy is essentially how you treat people.
Mm. Yeah. All right. Talk to me about the pressures of growing up as a police officer's child. Like, what did you feel? What made you realize maybe you're a little different than everybody else?
Ooh, I don't know that I felt any pressures.
Not from the
But
other
I
kids and stuff?
no, we grew up again in the 90s. It was a much different place.
Okay.
But also we went to Catholic school. We grew up in an area of Philadelphia where there were a lot of first responders. So we went to school with quite a few firefighter and police children.
Okay.
I mean, it's not something that we talked about or discussed really, but I like looking back, we were kind of in the same boat, at least a handful of us. That's definitely not the case now. Kids are definitely being given a hard time in school these days. I've heard horror stories for days. But I will say, like I said, we didn't talk about it amongst the other students. So while we may have known that so and so was the child of a police officer, we didn't talk about it. So I would say I have like a very vivid memory. I talked about this the other day on my Instagram of when I kind of started to realize that we were different because I was at the doctor's office and the nurse was asking a series of questions. I was probably like four. And, the questions that they ask, like, are your parents nice to you? Do you have a warm meal every night? Do you have your own bed? Like the questions, to make sure that the child is in a safe place.
Sure.
And she asked if my parents kept a gun in the house. And I remember freezing because they obviously
Right.
did. My dad was a police officer. I saw him put a gun on his hip every single day. And I didn't know how to answer because I was like, why would she ask me this? Like this is his job.
Right.
And my mom ended up stepping in and explained that my dad was a police officer, and it ended up actually becoming a conversation because the nurse felt that he should keep his gun in his car, which is a whole nother conversation. But
Ah,
yeah, but the nurse was so clearly disapproving of the fact that he had a gun, and I was like, but this is, in my head, I'm like, but this is his job. Like he has to wear this thing.
right.
And I think that that was probably the first time I noticed that things were a little bit unique in our family.
The Tactical Harmony podcast is hosted by Rebecca Fitzsimmons, a former NCIS special agent turned holistic leadership coach and mindset strategist. Drawing on nearly 20 years of experience empowering high achieving professionals to break barriers and lead with purpose, Rebecca shares tried and true strategies and actionable insights to help you excel in today's fast paced world. If you're ready to lead with impact and create harmony in the chaos, the Tactical Harmony podcast is for you. Available on Apple Podcasts and Spotify, or check it out at tacticalharmony.com or in the show notes below. Did you guys get a new nurse after that?
I don't remember, probably.
Yeah. I'd be like, all right, that's your one shot, nurse. Give me a
Yeah.
new one. That's my, yeah, that's, I think when you're young, like, you're like everybody else. Like, your parents are like superheroes, or they're bigger than
Mhm.
life. You don't really put a ton of onus or weight behind what they do. They're just your parents.
Yeah.
Was there
hmm
a time as you got older that you realized kind of the impact the career was having on family and society? And did you become scared of the dangers that we talked about before? Or did you have some kind of balancing act you did to not be so worried?
I I should probably ask my parents like what they did to kind of shelter us from the dangers because no, I never gave it any thought to the dangers. I remember like I just thought my dad goes to court a lot. My dad is on TV sometimes, and people sometimes recognize him from
Okay.
TV.
Yep.
And oh, and we would like tape his news appearances. Um, there you go. That's my 90s growing up.
There you go.
Um,
Yeah.
um, so that's kind of all I really thought about. But when I was in eighth grade, he worked on a really high profile case. It was a kidnapping case. He worked in special victims unit. So a lot of times he didn't talk to us about what he did, obviously. Even as we
Mhm.
got a little bit older and we maybe got a little bit more curious about what he did, he didn't really go super in depth into the cases he was working. He specifically worked with children. So like extra traumatic. But when I was in eighth grade, he worked on a kidnapping case, and the young girl had the infant had perished in the fire. But then, like 5 years later, the biological mother came to special victims and talked to my dad and was like, "I think I found my daughter. I don't think she died in that fire. Like, can you help me?" So my dad took on the case. She had actually been trying to get someone to listen to her for a long time, but she didn't speak Spanish. She didn't speak English. She
Sure.
only spoke Spanish. So she was having trouble like communicating. And then people were also kind of like, "You're just a grieving mother, like let it go," things like that. But my dad actually decided to listen to her. He thought he felt in his gut that something was right about what she was saying. So he followed that tip and it ended up being true. She had found her biological daughter. She had not died in the fire. She had been kidnapped. And it was a really high profile case. It was less gruesome than what he would typically deal with. So we were allowed to watch the news coverage. He would, talk to us about it within, however he was allowed to share.
Mhm.
And then once the case was, buttoned up and closed and solved, there was a lot of even more coverage after the fact. And he went to Washington, D.C., and George Bush actually gave him and his team an award for solving that case. And I think that that was the first time that I realized, like, oh, what he does is actually really, really impactful or can be. And that always has stood out to me is that whole year or so when he was working on that case.
Catherine, so I'm just going to make an assumption here. When your dad's working a case that big, that's a lot of his time, both physically and mentally. How did you balance not being jealous of him being pulled so hard some way, and maybe because that's probably going to cut back on the time you got or the attention? Because that's something I've always wondered is how do we balance that and make sure we're positively impacting our kids, not creating this resentment of, oh, you're available for everybody else but us.
Yeah, I think, and this is something I talk about a lot. I think it comes down to that intentionality piece and quality over quantity of time because you're not always going to have the quantity.
Yeah.
So make sure the time that you do have, especially in today's world, you're putting the phones away and you're spending quality time with the people who love you. My dad was really big on not taking on overtime. Obviously, cases like this, he would have to take on overtime, and there are instances where police officers have no choice but to take on overtime. But he reserved his overtime hours, essentially, his personal overtime hours for those instances. So he would not volunteer for overtime. He wouldn't necessarily put in for overtime unless it was important, required for the case or helping someone on his team. He would really be very mindful about how much he worked if he had control over it. And the times that he wasn't working, he was with us and we were doing something, probably at the park.
Did you guys take a lot of family vacations?
We took one every single year to Ocean City, New Jersey for 1 week.
Yeah.
And then twice when we were little, we went to Disney World.
So not a ton.
Mm-mm. No, they were, I mean, again, my dad never wanted to take on the extra overtime.
Yeah.
He truly believed that the quality time with my family is what matters. And my mom was very intentional about wanting to be a stay-at-home mom.
Love it.
And so they made the decision together, we're going to live off of your salary as a police officer and the salary that you make. We're not going to rely on overtime. Any overtime dollars that you get are going to be bonus money. We're going to set them aside. They were just very intentional with everything that they did, even down to the finances, so that they could live, the type of life that they wanted to live. And that didn't include fancy cars or lavish vacations. And as kids, we didn't care. We never felt like we were missing out because, the time, the things that we did do were just so exciting, even if it was just going to the park.
hmm And I love that. And I think so in some of the classes I teach, that's one of the big things I talk about because that's a pitfall a lot of first responders fall into is living on the overtime. Right?
Yeah.
Like they buy this house, they buy the cars, they do this stuff, and now they not only have to work the regular hours, but they have to have overtime to make ends meet.
hmm
And it just sets you up on such a slippery slope because when it's not available, now you're coming up short.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it not only takes you away from your family, but it could be detrimental to the life that you're living because if you're essentially living beyond your means, you don't have control over when that overtime is going to dry up or if it's going to dry up. So you don't actually know what's going to happen if, word comes down that you can't take on overtime for several weeks
hmm
or however long. And then what are you going to do? Like, you don't actually have the income to cover the
Yeah,
life you've established.
right. No, that's such a good thing. And that's great that your dad and your mom had that conversation and set that up because one of the biggest impacts on families is financial distress.
Yeah. hmm
Right. And as first responders, most places, first responders get paid enough to have a quality life in that community. It's just when we go beyond it, right? And we're not smart with that money.
Yeah, exactly. And one thing that a story I learned from my dad fairly recently that always cracks me up because, again, both my parents were frugal, but by default, they were already fairly frugal. And then they made this decision together, so they were very mindful. But one thing that we never had was fancy cars. Like they didn't care about cars. Cars weren't necessarily their thing. So their what was most important that they had a good car that could get us where we needed to go and ideally was paid off.
Right.
So at one stage in my dad's life, he used to drive the car that my mom had when they were still dating. So like my mom always had the good car, the better car because
Sure.
she would tote us around and then he would kind of just have like the other car to get him to and from work.
Yeah.
And so this car was several years old. Anyway, he had gotten his first promotion as lieutenant. He went to a new district or yeah, a new district. And every day he would park in his lieutenant's parking spot, and every day he would come out to a ticket on his car. And he was like, "What is with all these tickets?" And his tickets are building up. And so one day he went down to roll call and was like, "Who keeps ticketing my car?" And it was like a young cop was like, "Oh my God, that was me. I'm so sorry. I never thought that a lieutenant would be driving a hoopty. So I thought someone else was parking in your spot." And my
Uh,
dad was like, "No, that's my car. Stop putting a ticket on it."
Did he buy a new car? Just keep riding it.
No, no, we had that car for years and years and years until the wheels fell off.
That's so funny. Um, I love it. Because you're fairly young to be sharing these stories and this kind of wisdom. When did you decide that you were going to share this story publicly and that this was going to be kind of your platform?
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. So it's interesting. Like I keep saying, I never gave any thought to it. I never thought about it. It was what it was. But I am a civilian. And what I've come to realize is I'm a civilian with inside knowledge to what the life is like. So I'm kind of like in this middle gray area. And during 2020, I was living in New York City and I had friends who were participating in the riots and in the defund the police movement. And some of them were actually reaching out to me and challenging me and wanting me to get on board or wanting me to explain myself and my stance and things like that. And some of them were even sending pictures and videos of the riots to just show me how bad cops actually are. And it was a nightmare. But what came from that was I was quite literally being kept up at night by all of this between my personal life, friends, and my social media feeds. And one night I was just like, I remember I was sleeping on my parents' couch because my husband and I quarantined with my parents, and I was sleeping on their couch, and I like shot up right in the middle of the night, and I was like, I need to build a space for police officers where they can come and feel like they're protected, they're safe. There's a civilian out there who's got me, who supports me. And so I noodled on that for a while and I didn't know what that could possibly look like. Initially, I was like, is it an online community? Like, I don't know. So fast forward a few years, I sat on that idea for a while, maybe 2 years, and I started interviewing police officers. It actually started with the first round of my podcast I had mentioned to you,
Hmm.
and also private conversations with them, anyone that would talk to me about their experience. And again, it was like I was thinking like mental health or general support. So I was trying to figure out what this could look like. But during those conversations, I would introduce myself. I would tell them who I am, who my dad what is, and they would like freeze in their boots. They'd be like, "Wow, I can't believe how you're talking about your dad. You like the love that you have for your dad. I feel it just by talking to you. My kids would never talk about me the way you talk about him. I don't talk to my kids. I've got grandkids I haven't seen in years, this, that, and the other thing. And they were having revelations that they may have done something wrong or, missed the mark somewhere along the line.
Yeah.
And I was just like flabbergasted. My heart was breaking for these grown men. Some of them were crying. And I was like, what's happening? How is this a thing? Is this a thing? So that's when I started peeling back the layers of like the child's experience and what it actually is and decided like we need to close this gap
Mhm.
because the child is having a very real experience regardless of what they're expressing. So we have to start talking about that and addressing it because otherwise we're going to continue to have law enforcement families that are growing up splintered or inevitably broken. And then the fact that it's such a generational career that's going to go on for generations. So that's kind of how I got to where I'm at, where yeah, talking about kids.
And what was your family's reaction when you told them this?
I I didn't necessarily come out and say like this is what I'm gonna do. It was kind of like, oh, so I did this the other day and like now I have a podcast and like, very passive. And even when I did eventually try to explain it, I don't know that they understood it a whole lot because, they're baby boomers. They don't necessarily understand like the power that social media has and the impact that it can have. But now I'm doing more speaking engagements, and they actually came to one a couple weeks ago, which I was very lucky and blessed that they were able to do that because they were able to actually see what it is that I'm talking about when I'm talking about all the stuff that I'm doing and understand it a little bit better. And they just tell me how proud they are of me all the time and how important they think that it is also. Yeah, I always try to like pick their brains too. That's
Mhm.
kind of how it started. It would be like I would try to pick their brains about how and why they did what they did. But sometimes they're just like, I don't know. We just did it. We just like they're just so passive about it sometimes that, you know, it's just I can't get much out of them.
Yeah, I think that's not really uncommon though, right? Like when you're in the middle of things, you don't necessarily know the 360 perspective or the hindsight or the impacts beyond what you're doing because you're especially raising families. Like you're the day to day sometimes is such a grind, right? That's why there's
Yeah.
that saying that the days are long but the years are short.
Mm, yeah.
So, what let's go back. So you're teaching a class and you're starting to hear this, and you're starting to see the emotion. What were some common themes that you've heard that maybe we can change the trajectory if people are aware of, so that when they leave the career, they do have fully functioning families and kids that want to be around them.
Yeah. I mean, I think the biggest thing is intentionality. Being intentional with your time, depending, like, regardless of what your shift is, regardless of what else is going on, being really intentional, about having that quality time can go a really long way because you don't necessarily like have to move mountains to make a difference in a young person's life, especially when it's your own child. I have a very vivid memory of my dad pushing me on the swings, and we were singing Frank Sinatra, and then he went off to work. Like it was 5 minutes, and I still remember it to this day. I remember what song we were singing and everything. So, like I said, you don't have to do these big gestures or take them on big lavish vacations. They don't want those things. They want you. And I
Yeah,
think remembering that and keeping that top of mind is really important. But then also actually doing the things you're going to do. Like when you want to come home and just veg out on the couch, maybe there's a time and place for that, depending on what's going on in your life and your job and in the world. But, don't make that the norm. Don't make that the regular thing. It's going to do you and your children and your spouse a disservice if that's how you live the better part of your life. So take the ball outside, throw it around. Don't overthink it, like just do it. Make memories with your family and it's going to go a really long way. The other thing, this one I feel like this is kind of a muddy area because kids need rules, they need structure, they need that. But also, like I said, we were raised with values over rules. So when you are raising kids, it's like you have to it has to be a give and take to a degree. You can't just kind of rule with an iron fist, I don't think. Again, I'm no parenting expert or expert
right.
in any capacity, but I do think, when you put all of these rules in place and make your kids feel like they can't do anything, that's going to work against
For
the
sure.
whole family.
And I think that's pretty normal for law enforcement because so much of our job is
Absolutely.
enforcing the rules.
Yeah, and I can't imagine how hard it is either because you're going out there and you're seeing all of these things and you want nothing more than to keep your own kids in a bubble, I would imagine.
Yeah.
And so, again, this is like a very muddy area.
Mm, I don't
And I think
think
it's an
s
area.
I agree
No?
with you, Kath. And I don't think it's money because I will almost guarantee if we take one clip from this show and send it to my kids, they'll be like, that's where you could have been better, Dad. Guaranteed.
Oh, did you have big rules? A lot of rules?
I don't think we had a lot of rules. I had very high expectations for sure
Hmm.
because I believe in just being excellent across the board. And I think
Hmm.
that starts with expectations. But we had rules. And I don't, like when you're talking about values or rules, I don't know that we did a good enough job clarifying the difference.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. I think that that's very common. I don't think I've come to realize that the values thing is pretty unique. Like again, I don't know if it was my parents, the Catholic upbringing, their Catholic upbringing,
right.
but I haven't met anyone else that was raised by rules. And it's interesting. It's very full circle for me because my husband, my now husband, certainly was not raised with values. He was raised with very strict rules
Yeah.
that he did not follow.
Right.
And uh
Such a good
when
point.
yeah, and we've been together for overall 12 years, but we broke up for a while in the middle because I couldn't handle his nature because he was always wanting to go break the rules and, not get in like serious trouble,
Right.
but, if a boss tells him to do one thing, he wants to do the opposite. And we broke up for a period of time. And while we were apart, he decided to do some work on himself, do some soul searching. And, when we got back together, when we started to reconnect, he told me that during that time, he decided what was missing was core values. And he learned that from me. He said that he observed that I lived by a set of values and that he didn't even know what values were. So he went and he studied and he learned and he developed his own set of core values based on what he had just observed from his experience with me.
Yeah. No, that's super powerful. And it's something like now I look back, I'm like, man, I should definitely do it. Because we talk a lot about people can recite the mission statement for their employers, the core values of their company. But you're right, in our own lives, like, well, what are our values?
Yeah.
What do we stand for? What is our mission statement person? That's something I work on a lot. But yeah, as you're saying, I'm like, oh, my kids would, they'd be like, Dad, that's right there. That's where you could have been better, for sure.
Oh, that's so interesting. I mean,
Yeah.
that's common with law enforcement, though.
It is, man, and it's a default too, I think, because you don't want them to turn out to be like the people you're dealing with all the day, all
Yep.
the time, right? And you're just like, if these
Yeah.
people just follow the rules, we wouldn't even
Hmm.
meet each other. So you kind
Yeah.
of default to follow the rules in life is good, but you're absolutely right. The rules, a certain percentage are going to follow them. A certain percentage of good people are going to rebel against the rules just to see how like legit these rules are.
Hmm.
Right? It's kind of probably like
Yeah.
your husband, like, okay, there's a rule, but why do we have this? And my wife would tell you, like, for a cop, you hate rules, and she's absolutely right. I hate just having random rules on me.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. Well, so that's a good point, though. Okay, if you're not going to do the values thing, or you still want to implement rules and stipulations and things like that, explain why.
yeah.
Help them understand the why, because I think that that could be really helpful.
Hmm.
Like, again, they're kids, but they're still people, and they still need to understand. Like, the because I said so thing, like, doesn't work for a reason.
Yeah, especially nowadays when they can Google to see if you actually know
Yeah,
what you're talking about.
that's such a good point. Yeah.
Right back in the day, because I said so had some weight because they had like an encyclopedia that was outdated they could look at
Right.
to see if you're telling the truth. Like if you knew what you're saying. Now they're like, oh, Dad, let me Google you. Yeah, that's not a thing.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
oh man. So Catherine, what are your goals and your dreams? Share with us, like, what is it, like, not just for others, but where are you headed with things in your life?
Ooh, man, this is not, I'm a very day-to-day person. I've always struggled with like the 5-year plan, the 10-year plan. But personally, I just want to be as healthy and fit as possible. So that's always a work in progress.
Yeah,
And I want to continue to have this conversation and help families really live their best lives and accomplish everything that they want to accomplish and more. And I want to help the children of law enforcement feel and be seen and heard. And I think that just growing this mission is really my biggest focus for the next, I can't even tell you how
sure.
long as I can imagine.
And you're doing that. You're doing some public speaking now in addition to the podcast.
Yes, yes. I started that this year. And I absolutely love it. It's just incredible and it's very rewarding. I've had people come up to me after presentations and tell me that I answered questions about their own childhood that they didn't even know that they had.
Mm.
And one woman who was actually a police officer, her father was a police officer, and she always like didn't resent him, but always was a little frustrated by certain rules that he had in place when she was little,
Yeah.
about no sleepovers, very, very strict about like going out with friends and things like that. And after hearing me speak, she was able to connect the dots that they sort of came back around to a specific case that she ended up learning that he worked. And so she was able to understand his perspective a little bit better. And so I think just understanding this 360, like we're all humans coming from different angles and different perspectives, but at the end of the day, we're all people and we're all observing life and the world is really important. And so I just love to be able to share that and to start the conversation and open up the dialogue to understand one another a little bit more.
Yeah, because we're all writing our own stories, but your
Hmm.
story impacts my story.
Exactly, especially when it comes to a parent-child.
Hmm. Yeah, no, that's amazing. And I'm so proud of you for stepping into this and leading these discussions. And I can't imagine the impact you're going to have. Um, and it's just going to keep compounding, right? You're going to keep getting more and more opportunities, and people are going to talk. And it all goes back to this, Catherine. That is believing in yourself and having the courage that your story matters and sharing it. And that's one of the things I always want to share with our audience is everybody's story is going to impact somebody else, but only if we give them a chance to hear it.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's interesting you say that because for a long time I struggled with that concept because my story is not groundbreaking. It is not a rise from the ashes kind of story. It was
Right.
always happy. I have nothing but, happiness for the most part. And I didn't have this like hero's journey. I never had a hero's journey to share. So I thought that my story wasn't worth sharing for a long time. Um, and now here we are, and it's making a difference.
No, absolutely it is. And I commend you for doing it. But before I let you go, Catherine, there's another story I want to hear about.
Okay. Uh-oh.
The cat. You told me the cat that popped up on the screen earlier is a big part of your purpose. So I want to hear how the cat ties into the purpose.
So she doesn't technically tie into this purpose,
Yeah,
but
any.
she's been a very, very big part of my life. My husband got her for us when we had been dating for about a year. And the first couple of years of our relationship were very tumultuous.
Yeah.
And she was my just like crutch for a long time. I really relied on her for emotional support for a long time. And now that we're back together and we're a happy family again, it's just amazing to see how full circle our relationship has come. And she's like this little product of it.
Does she have
She's been there every step of the way.
No, that's amazing. Does she have favorites?
Oh, him, 100%.
Really?
Yeah, oh yeah. This morning I took a picture. He left for work and she caught a glimpse of him out the window and she ran over to the window and started crying at the window and then watched his car drive by.
Well, maybe you have to let her listen to this part of the podcast a couple times to see if you can sway her.
I try all the time to sway her. It does not work. It does not work.
Catherine, where can our audience follow you, stay connected with you, and support you on your journey and become part of your team?
Yeah, I'm most active on Instagram. I do have a LinkedIn, but I'm more active on Instagram at the LT's daughter. And then on my podcast, which is Beyond the Uniform with the LT's daughter. Yeah, I would love if you guys could listen to my show also. I'll be having you on soon. I'm very excited for that conversation.
Should be fun.
And yeah, Instagram, I'm very active on there. I love to have conversations on there.
Catherine, thank you so much for starting your day with us. Thank you for having the courage to share your voice, and thank you for what you're doing for the world. Keep your light shining, my friend.
Thank you so much.
And remember, team, life is far too short to live any other way than on purpose. We will see you all again next week.